Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1, and it's the moment we've all been waiting for. Our season rankings of all the drivers for 2023. Now, if you're not aware, after every single race, I give each driver a score between 1 and 10. And what we've done is added up every single score we've given them all year to give this definitive ranking of every single driver. Let's get started with number 22, Liam Lawson. Now, put down the pitchforks because this ranking is based on the scores they had for every race. And he didn't compete in every race. He missed 17 of them, in fact. But the races he did take part in were very impressive, to the point that his average score from me this year was 8.8, which if he had competed all year and kept that average, he would have been second overall on this list. He got back-to-back 10 out of 10s in his debut in the Netherlands, in Monza, and then in Singapore, with some incredible results, specifically his 9th in Monza, meaning that he would end up this year above Logan Sergeant and Nick de Vries in the Drivers' Championship. His time in F1 though this year would end not with a bang, but with a bit of a whimper, with a 17th in Qatar. But I am sure this will not be the last time we see Liam Lawson in Formula 1, and I cannot wait to see him back in that car. Number 21, Daniel Ricciardo. Once again, this is based on a score from each race, and Ricciardo competed in 7 of the 22 races this year. His average score would have been good enough for 4th in a full season. Ricciardo's races this year, though, can be put into 2 categories: very impressive drives or very unlucky drives. In his return in Hungary, he was unlucky to get caught up in a lap 1 incident. In Mexico, he had an incredible race and finished 7th, which is AlphaTauri's highest finishing position of the year in proper races, not sprint races. In Brazil, Ricciardo would have great pace, but due to being caught up in another lap 1 incident, he'll be a lap down from the rest of the grid. Then in Abu Dhabi, a tear-off got stuck in his brake duct at the start of the race, throwing his entire strategy off for the entire race. Overall, though, it's been a very good year for Ricciardo, who has refound his mojo after his time at McLaren and has very much proved he belongs in Formula 1. Number 20. Nick de Vries. Nick is 20th, and his average score would have seen him being 20th. Disappointing performances in Australia, Baku and Miami looked to seal the fate of Nick de Vries, but a decent drive in Monaco may have delayed the inevitable. More bad results in Spain and Canada meant that Nick de Vries' time in F1 came to a very quick end just after the British Grand Prix. 19th. Logan Sergeant. It's the first appearance for someone who competed in the entire season, but it wasn't a good season for Logan Sergeant, even by rookie standards. One of his best races of the year would actually be the first race, where he finished in 12th, a result he wouldn't come close to again for 9 races. His worst race of the year was Japan, where he crashed in qualifying and the race, and became the second driver this year that I actually gave a 0 out of 10 to as a score for their weekend. 2 races later, though, he would benefit from a double disqualification to finish 10th and get his one and only point of the year. 18th, Lance Stroll. It's not been a great year for Lance either. After coming back from a broken wrist at the start of the season to finish 6th, I gave him a 10 out of 10, but he would not get that good a score again for a while. In Monaco, Lance would qualify 14th, get stuck behind Magnuson all race, then retire the car. But Lance would get some decent performances in towards the end of the year in Austin, Brazil and Las Vegas, with back-to-back 5th places in Brazil and Vegas. Vegas being one of the few races where he would actually beat his teammate Fernando Alonso. So finishing on a high for Lance Stroll that hopefully he'll be able to continue into next year. 17th, Guan Yu. The final year of the Alfa Romeo team has been yet another mediocre one. Zhou was able to get the most out of the car on occasion, picking up points here and there, with his best race being when he finished 9th in Qatar. Hungary should have also been a high point for Zhou, with a career best qualifying of 5th, but he would throw it all the way into turn 1. 16th, Valterri Bottas. The mediocre Alpha has also affected Valtteri Bottas. A great start to the year saw him finish 8th in Bahrain. He would then repeat this months later in Qatar, but overall very average performances and a bad ending, finishing no higher than 15th in the last 4 races. 15th, Kevin Magnuson. It's been a mixed year for K-Mag. He was very much shown up in qualifying by Nico Hulkenberg, but his race pace has been decent. His highlight of the year was going wheel to wheel all race with Charlesclerc in Miami, where he was able to bring home a point for the Haas team. But mostly average performances leave him low in this rankings, especially the final race in Abu Dhabi, which saw him finish dead last, even being beaten by Carlos Sainz, who didn't actually finish the race. 14th, Nico Hulkenberg. His teammate is next in 14th place, who had a much better year, especially considering his years out of the sports before this season. He was one red flag away from a career-first podium in Australia, and he had some great performances in Canada, Austria, Singapore and Mexico. But much like Magnuson, sometimes he would be very much let down by his car and won't be able to get anything more out of it. Spa and Vegas are definitely weekends to forget for Hulkenberg, where he finished 18th and 19th place. 13th, Esteban Ocon. An interesting year for Ocon. Off the back of beating Fernando Alonso last year, he then went on to get beaten by his new teammate, Pierre Gasly. He had an awful start to the year by setting a record for getting the most penalties ever received in a Formula 1 race in Bahrain. He would then go on to break that again in Austria. It wasn't all bad though, as he would deliver arguably lap of the season in qualifying during the Monaco Grand Prix and then convert that into a podium, and another fantastic result he would have later on in the year would be a 4th place in Las Vegas. 12th, Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki has very much gone up in my estimation this year and has developed really well over the season. He's had some decent performances at the start of the year, but really came into his own in the final part of the season, with fantastic drives in Qatar, Austin, Brazil, and of course Abu Dhabi, where he qualified a career high of 6th and would come home in 8th place. Austria and Monaco would be 2 of the worst performances for Yuki though, and they are also the only 2 times that he was beaten by Nick de Vries. 11th, Sergio Perez. Well, the story of Sergio Perez's year. Where to start? He would start the year quite well with wins in Saudi Arabia and Baku, but then would have possibly the worst performance of his entire career in Monaco, with a crash in Q1 and a 16th place finish at a track that he's been so successful at previously, which earned him a 0 out of 10 in my rankings. From there, Sergio went on to have his infamous streak of not seeing Q3, but would deliver some good recovery drives, especially in Austria, going from 15th to 3rd. Towards the end of the year, his performances would improve, the highlight being his podium in Las Vegas. 10th, George Russell. Into the top 10 now with Captain Crikey George Russell. Like so many others, he started the year well with a good result in Miami and what looked to be his only podium of the year in Spain. From there though, he looked to be very average before he infamously threw away a potential win in Singapore by crashing into the wall. But he would more than make up for this in Qatar, when he came back from being hit by his teammate at the start to finish a very respectable 4th place in the toughest race of the year. George would then go on to double his podium tally for the year in the final race at Abu Dhabi. But overall, this would be a season to forget for George, with some very average performances and the occasional rookie mistake. 9th, Carlos Sainz. It's also been a shaky year for the smooth operator. He is, of course, the only non-Red Bull race winner of the year after his victory in Singapore, which is also the end of his streak of races of Netherlands, Monza and Singapore, where he was driving like prime Michael Schumacher in his Ferrari. His races to forget were a disappointing 8th in Monaco and a silly crash in Spa with Oscar Piastri, as well as an awful qualifying performance in Abu Dhabi. But overall, for Carlos, I believe it's a year with more highs than lows. 8th, Pierre Gasly. The Gas man has had a successful first year as part of the Alpine team. A podium in the chaotic Dutch Grand Prix will be the one he's remembering for a long time, and 2 races later he would follow this up with a fantastic 6th in Singapore. Great results also came in Bahrain, Miami, Monaco, Austin and Brazil, making this a season where Gasly has proved he can thrive outside of the Red Bull family. 7th, Charles Leclerc. The hangover of 2022 stuck with Charles at the start of the season. The team would let him down in Bahrain and Saudi, and he would make mistakes in Australia and Miami, which seemed like a repeat of the lowlights of the previous year. But as the season went on, both Charles and Ferrari improved. He would have 4 front rows in a row in the final 4 races and convert 3 of them into podiums. Both Charles and Ferrari seem to be on the up, form they'll be hoping to carry into 2024. 6th, Oscar Piastri. Our highest rated rookie is at the high heights of 6th in our ranking. Piastri has arguably been the best rookie in over a decade. He had back-to-back podiums in Japan and Qatar, as well as a sprint race victory at the Qatar GP as well. Great drives in Silverstone, Singapore and Las Vegas also showed the class of the rookie. Even when the McLaren wasn't performing very well, Piastri was able to get the most out of it, although his lowlights will be the 19th place in Miami. Despite this, the future looks bright for Oscar Piastri, and he is definitely one to keep an eye on. 5th, Lewis Hamilton. A second winless season for the 7-time world champion, but it definitely was not a bad year. He came out of the blocks with some great results in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, following that up with a podium in Australia. He would have more great races to see him on the podium in Spain and Silverstone, as well as another 3 different races. But the final part of the season will hopefully not leave too bad a taste in his mouth after crashing into his teammate in Qatar and being disqualified from a 2nd place finish at the very next race. After a questionable season in 2022, Hamilton has proved that he is still the real deal, if that ever needed to be proved in the first place. 4th, Fernando Alonso. The 2023 season may be remembered for many different things, but without a doubt, one of the biggest has been Fernando Alonso's return to the front of the grid. After 10 years in no man's land, Alonso was finally given a chance to show how good he is again. From the get-go, he was able to get 6 podiums from the first 8 races, highlights being 2 P2s in Canada and Monaco. Monaco being a race where a better strategy around the rain may have seen him take that elusive 33rd win. The Aston was not able to stay at the front all year though, and would fall away after the summer break. Alonso's low point would be at Mexico, where it looked like Aston had brought the slowest car on the grid as they desperately tried to understand their upgrades. Alonso would be able to have one last high though before the end of the season with a final hard-fought podium in Brazil. This has been a great step in the right direction for Alonso and for Aston, one they'll be hoping to capitalise on into the next season. 3rd, Lando Norris. Lando Norris seems to often be the bridesmaid rather than the bride, but if that is true, Lando is definitely the maid of honour. Lando's season seemed to start once the McLaren came alive in Austria. Since then, he seemed almost unstoppable, with podiums in Silverstone, Hungary, Singapore, Japan, Qatar, Texas and Brazil. But even when he hasn't finished on the podium, he's had some very good races, especially in Mexico, where he came from 17th to 5th. The only downside of Lando's year is towards the start, when the McLaren wasn't as good. He seemed to struggle sometimes even more than his rookie teammates, especially in Saudi Arabia and Spain, where he threw away an incredible qualifying performance of 3rd into turn 1. But overall, this has been one of the best seasons of Lando's career, who has answered all of his critics' questions of was it right to stay at McLaren. All that's left to do now is get that elusive victory, and if McLaren can continue to give him a good car, I'm sure it will come sooner rather than later. 2nd, Alex Albon. Albon has been criticised a lot in his career, especially during his time at Red Bull. But this second stint of his career in Williams has proved how good he truly is. He has consistently outperformed his Williams for 2 years now. he was able to get Williams a point in the first race of the year, something that hasn't happened to the team since 2016. From there, he put in some great performances, including an unbelievable 7th place in Canada and another points finish 2 races later in Silverstone, as well as great races which would be pointless, like in Hungary he went from 16th to 11th. He'll be back in the points in the Netherlands and Monza and should have made it 3 in a row in Singapore if not for a last lap shunt from Sergio Perez. He would have points in 3 races in a row though in Qatar, Texas and Mexico, the first time this has been done by a Williams driver in 6 years. Albon may not have had any podiums or wins this year, but he is easily one of the best on the grid, and with him in the car and James Vowles on the pit wall, I am sure Williams will be going back into the right direction. And number 1, Max Verstappen. Well, I'm sure you're all shocked. Max Verstappen is our driver of the year, but realistically, who else could it be? 19 wins, 21 podiums, 12 pole positions, 4 sprint race wins, 575 points, 1,003 laps in the lead, 10 wins in a row, a 3rd world title and a partridge in a pear tree. The stats speak for themselves. Max Verstappen has been unbelievable this year and has set records that very well may never ever be beaten. He has cemented himself in the history books of Formula 1 and there is nobody else that can be our driver of the year. The scariest thing of all is this feels like he's just getting started. So there you go, there is our driver ratings and rankings for 2023. I hope you have enjoyed. Please let me know what you agree with, what do you disagree with, and until next time, have a good one. See you later. Goodbye.